dependent, and yet they are not fully independent or capable of being independent at that time. And that's why a lot of conflicts between parents and adolescents take place, okay? So why is that the case? How come it's difficult for us to understand adolescents? And well, we may have our own share of stories, of arguments with our parents, our own share of ideas that we are not understood by those who are older than us, when we were adolescents. So, but definitely, adolescence is a period of change. And there are physical, psychological, social, and even moral, emotional development that happens there. And these all contribute to why adolescents behave that way. Now, the thing is, being, well, let's say for teachers or counselors or those who work with young people, they have experiences of various adolescents, and that probably helps them understand who the adolescent is. But for parents whose encounter with young people are only their kids, so their idea of adolescence is in a way limited, and that's why it's good to understand a little background of how adolescents develop, okay? And at the same time, it's a period of vulnerability and adjustment for them. There are a lot of things that they discover, new things, and in a way, these new things are things that would make them feel concerned about, okay? So they start to seek the approval of their peers in particular. Well, they look for approval of their parents as well, but this is also the period where they wanted to be accepted by their peers, people their age. And that period of vulnerability and adjustment could come in problematic if the adolescents are not presented with opportunities for growth, opportunities to make mistakes, I would say. Of course, when you say mistakes, these are calculated mistakes, I would say. Okay. Now, a big part of the explanation I'm going to do here is the brain. Okay. We will talk in particular the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is right behind our forehead. And if you see in the screen, at the right, there's this image of a boy with earphones, and then there's somehow the brain there illustrated. And you look at the yellow portion, it says there's self-control under construction. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for the executive functions. I will be discussing that shortly. So the prefrontal cortex is still under development. It will fully develop at around 25 years of age. So what does the prefrontal cortex, or rather, what does executive function mean? Okay? Executive function actually speaks of higher order cognitions. We say higher order cognitions, things that involve thinking, pausing, okay, and also self-control, okay. And that's why it's difficult for adolescents, well, even with young kids, but also adolescents, to have self-control, precisely because the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. Now, I'm not saying here that it's all right for kids not to, have self-control. In fact, as an educator, I would tell parents and even, other teachers that it's not an excuse for adolescents to behave in such a way that, we give the excuse that their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. It's actually an opportunity for them to grow and to learn, And in fact, knowing that, we have to be more deliberate in helping students, in helping our adolescents have more self-control and to develop their executive functions and higher order thinking, okay? So, and it also, with that, they also find it difficult to inhibit inappropriate actions. And sometimes you might find, oh, how come this teenager behaves this way? Doesn't he know or doesn't she know that that one is inappropriate, okay? And also, they may have difficulties in problem solving. Well, not in the sense of solving math problems, but solving problems that they encounter in day-to-day events, you know. And higher order cognition also involves planning. So I see this very much among, well, boys. We know that girls, they mature faster than boys, but I realize that um, for teenagers, they have to be guided on how to solve problems and how to plan things out. And that's a skill that they develop in the university, I would say. Of course, in high school and grade school also. But we don't expect them to be able to know, to have a very good problem solving skill. You know, I'm also involved in mentoring, and I have been doing research also in mentoring. And one of the things that mentors do is that without mentors knowing it, is that they are able to help their mentees solve problems by presenting to them their difficulties and asking them questions and going through the process of problem solving along the way with the mentees. And this is something that I discovered in a research some years ago when a mentee mentioned that, you know, my mentor actually helped me have that, to develop problem solving skills by, you know, helping me go through a problem that he was going through, and with that he was empowered. Okay, so this is one of the things that we can do to allow the students or our mentees or our kids to solve problems on their own, because our impulse could be give the solution immediately. Okay, and we're depriving them of that opportunity to be able to solve problems on their own. And you know, once they are capable of that, then they could be more independent. They could be empowered to solve problems on their own. Okay. Now, planning is also important because one of the qualities of higher order thinking is to be able to plan things out. And I think this is very helpful nowadays. I'll mention this also later. During the pandemic, one of the things that the pandemic has removed from us is a sense of control and predictiveness. You know, before the pandemic happened, we more or less have expectations. We more or less know what's going to happen during the day. We go to the office, we work, you know. But now with the pandemic, there are a lot of things that we're not sure of. And that is one of the causes of anxiety, which I will also again discuss later. So problem solving and planning, these are also things that we need to develop among the young people. Self-awareness. And the funny thing is that adolescents are so particular about how they look, but at the same time, self-awareness, not necessarily how they look, is needed. Well, when you speak of self-awareness here, the things that they say, are they aware of what they're saying? Are they aware of what they're thinking? And actually, we could also fall into this sometimes, well, maybe most of the time, we're not aware of the thoughts that are running through our minds. And this is something that I do when I do counseling. Sometimes when I ask clients to recall what was happening in their mind when they were very angry, when they were very sad, and at times they find it difficult. I had to ask them to write things that happen in their mind, the things that they think of immediately after they experience those emotions. No? So self-awareness is something that could be developed not only by adolescents, but by ourselves as well. The next one is thinking about the consequences of one's action. This is somehow related to impulsivity. And we can say that adolescents are also impulsive at times. They don't think of the consequences of their actions. And at times, they would actually feel bad for the consequences of their actions. And this is, again, another opportunity for us to help them think beyond the immediate consequences or the immediate or the current situation or current feeling that they have at the moment. So to explain to them the consequences of one's action, not just the immediate consequences, but sometimes the consequences have lasting effect. And it's good to keep that in mind also. Now, decision making. That's why, as a counselor also, I have helped students decide about the courses they need to take. And a couple of these students actually would shift to another course, or they think that they're in the wrong course. Now, it's okay, because even we ourselves, adults, may find it difficult to make decisions. But at the same time, again, we look at it as opportunities, and that's why here's where we guide students. If we want to enable them to have good decision-making skills, then we make them do such decisions. And of course, guiding them, helping them go through it, helping them go through the process. And if there are mistakes, especially if the mistakes are not so consequential, maybe these are little mistakes, it's good for them to realize that, to know, because at times the best lessons we get are from our mistakes, okay? And then looking into the future, to be able to, I've mentioned earlier about planning, I've mentioned earlier about looking at the consequences of one's actions. And this tied together in looking into the future, because these young people, they also have aspirations, and maybe not as strong as when they were younger, but they have aspirations of what our lives should be. And it's also good to make our kids, our teenagers, or our students to dream big, to be able to go beyond their comfort zone. So it's good to encourage them, to be encouraging, to be able to dream big, so that they have something to look forward to in the future. And with that, it will help them develop themselves. If they have an idea of what they want to be in the future, then the best time to work on ourselves to be able to reach that future is now. And we can capitalize on that, so that the adolescents can start to work and focus on achieving that goal. And of course, it's possible that the goals would change, and it's okay if the goals change, as long as we still try to stick to developing ourselves to reach that goal. That's important, okay? And social interactions, this is very important for them, that they wanted to be accepted, especially now in social media, where inhibitions can be less compared to in-person interaction. And we have to be careful with that, because there are also studies that show that students or adolescents who are actually not as sociable in person, and they want to socialize, they do it in social media. They become more sociable in social media, but that could have bad repercussions also, because if there are rejections in real life, they find it difficult to engage in real life, then that bounces back to them of insecurities. The same study also showed that those who are very social in person, they could also be very social in social like Facebook, this websites, okay? And then again, setting goals. It's good that we teach them how to set goals. We can start with little goals that are easy to achieve. Again, it depends on each person. So it's good to have several goals, and it's good to have goals that are achievable initially, because if you set a goal too high and it's really very difficult to achieve, then one becomes discouraged. In behavior modification, what is encouraged, or what the common practice is to set achievable goals, because of course it's useless to achieve goals that are too difficult. So it's good to have this little achievements, because it gives a sense of fulfillment to the person, and it tells the person, hey, I am also capable of achieving other things. And gradually we can increase the difficulty of the goals, okay? But what's important in setting goals is that the goals are achievable. Now, that's the prefrontal cortex that's responsible for the executive function that I've mentioned earlier. Now we'll talk about another part of the brain, the limbic system. This is found in the middle, inside the core of our brain, if you would like to look at it that way. And this one is involving emotions and behaviors, such as seeking rewards, excitement, and sensations. So is what makes a person want that the senses are affected. Like look at the picture at the right. You see here, I can imagine that the girl probably finds it exciting to drive very fast, and maybe the dad to the right is fearful. And that kind of behavior um, is what the limbic system does. And that probably explains why young people they risk. They have a high level of risking. And the thing is, uh, the limbic system fully develops ahead of the prefrontal cortex. So when the person is already seeking sensations to make themselves feel things, and the inhibition part, which is in the prefrontal cortex, is not yet there. And that explains why the adolescents behave that way. Okay, that's why the teenage years are when the teenagers would like to explore, and these are times wherein they, like drive fast, like quote unquote live dangerously, or maybe drink alcohol or even take drugs, because these are all related to sensations and feelings. Okay. Then again, as I've mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that we allow them to be as such. What I'm saying here is that, okay, it's really difficult for them to behave the way we want because of these things that are beyond them. But it does not mean that they cannot be trained, that they cannot learn from it. What it tells us is that, okay, this is the way probably they're disposed, and it's an opportunity for us to help them develop. Okay. Then we go to stress and anxiety, okay, which probably I would say in general is heightened nowadays. Okay. According to the American Psychological Association, stress and anxiety share a lot of common symptoms, and only a fine line differentiates the two. So more or less they're the same. But what's the difference? The difference is the presence of the stressor. Well, of course, when there's a stressor, we feel stressed. When we take out the stressor, then we don't become stressed anymore. But for anxiety, if we remove the stressor, the stress is still there, then that becomes anxiety. Okay, this is the common anxiety. We'll discuss later clinical anxiety, anxiety disorder later. Okay. Now, stress is a normal reaction to everyday pressures, but it can be unhealthy if it hinders one from doing his or her day-to-day activities. And some would even differentiate the good kind of stress and quote-unquote the bad kind of stress. When you say good kind of stress, well, I have a friend now, his wife just gave birth today, and that's a good kind of stress, because you have, a baby girl, to the world. And he mentioned in his Facebook post that he also feels the weight of being a father, but at the same time, there's joy there, Now, the negative kind of stress is when our boss probably shouted at us, or we didn't we failed in something. Now, I would say that a good attitude would be looking at stress as a challenge. Okay, let me just give this example. In a class, there's it's in a new class of math. Let's say there are three classmates who were talking, and presented in front of them is a book, their textbook in math. The guy who likes math says, "Oh wow, I can't wait to open this book. I love math." Okay, the two others didn't like math. The second one said, "Well, I don't like math. I don't even want to touch that book." So that's like a source of stressor for him. Now, the third student, let's say, she also doesn't like math, but when she looked at the book and she tells herself, "Well, I really don't. I'm not really good in math, but maybe through this textbook, I might be able to increase my knowledge of math even just a bit, or her skill in math would increase." So it's the same stressor, but they perceive it differently. One sees it as a difficulty, the other one sees it as a challenge. Okay. And it's good to have that kind of attitude towards stress. Of course, there are certain stressors that can be perceived in that sense because it could be too heavy. But with the little stressors that we have, or even some bigger stressors, if we perceive it in that way as an opportunity or as a challenge, then we may be able to cope. Our coping for stress will be better. Now, what are the manifestations of being stressed? So, a person who is stressed can feel the following. These are physical or mental symptoms: irritability, anger, fatigue, muscle pain, digestive troubles, difficulty sleeping. Okay. So these are the things that we can feel if we are stressed. And, we can actually manage, if we just get some rest or take time off, then we'll be able to cope with stress. Now, in some research, they also classified stress as chronic and acute kind of stress. So the chronic kind of stress is that the stressor is there pervasive. Let's say we don't like a person at work, and because this person, is sorts of stressor for us, and that's what we call chronic stress because the stressor is present every day. But the acute kind of stress is an event that happens in our life. For example, we're afraid of presenting in front of a panel. That is an acute stress because it's just that at that time that he's afraid of presenting. What is actually harmful for our health is the chronic kind of stress, because even if it's just a little kind of stress, but it's sustained every day for a period of time, then that can affect our physical health. Well, of course, our mental health in a way also. So that is stress. Now, anxiety is characterized by persistent, excessive worries that don't go away even with the absence of the stressors. I've mentioned this earlier. And let's take a look at the symptoms, which are similar to stress. So, finding it difficult to sleep, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, muscle tension, irritability. And these are the things that we also saw in stress earlier. The anxiety disorder. Now, people with anxiety disorder usually have recurring intrusive thoughts or concerns, and then they may avoid certain situations out of worry. So when it becomes more difficult for the person to cope with his stress or anxiety, it could become an anxiety disorder. Okay. Now, anxiety disorder can also have physical symptoms such as sweating, trembling, dizziness, or rapid heartbeat. So these are different symptoms now as compared to stress and anxiety that I've mentioned earlier. So when there are physical manifestations such as sweating, trembling, dizziness, or rapid heartbeat that somehow prevents us from working properly at our optimum, then it could be anxiety disorder. But of course, it's we can't, if we are not trained, then it's good to consult a professional if ever we suspect ourselves or our loved one to have anxiety disorder. So that's why it's good to consult a psychologist or a counselor for that. Now, this is a website of the UP Diliman Psychosocial Services. If ever we need some psychosocial help, you can consult us. I can leave the link later, and probably we can distribute it to you later on. And then if you need online consultations, we have also psychiatrists here who are able to do online consultations. This is also the same list that I give to our students and those who are in need of counseling from psychologists, and then from psychiatrists who could prescribe medicine. And there are websites and email addresses here as well. And then at the bottom of this screen, you'll see the website for online consultations with different medical professionals. So I can share this again later. Okay, now coping with stress and anxiety in terms of mild stress and anxiety. So the coping mechanisms could be, we can look into physical exercises. Do we have enough activity, physical activity that for the day. This is recommended by doctors and by mental health professionals as well. We go to the most basic, physical activity, proper diet, nutrition, because our nutrition definitely affects our mood, affects our mind as well, and then good sleep. I cannot overemphasize the importance of good sleep because, later on I'll be mentioning this psychiatrist from Harvard Medical School who prescribed sleeping to his client with depression. And actually, when the client was able to get good sleep after a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, then she was able to recover from that depression. And I have read studies also that when we are able to get good sleep, there are a lot of qualifications there for sleep to be good. No? Good sleep actually cleanses our body of toxins. So that's when we speak of physical well-being. In fact, there are these trainers from Kinetics Lab. We had a podcast, I think a month ago. I was giving a talk on mental health during the pandemic, and when I told them about sleep, and they were saying that, sir, that's the same thing that we recommend for athletes, those who are weight training, bodybuilding. So sleep is very important, but that's when the body recuperates. And not only the body, because it also makes us more objective of an event that happened. What do I mean by this? Well, sleep enables us to separate the emotions associated with an event. Of course, when something happens, something that affects our emotions, like say we were shouted at by a police officer, there is an emotion associated with that. And what happens? Normally, we get angry at the police. I don't know what happens in our head. We maybe say all sorts of things against that officer, or it can even make us feel bad about ourselves. How lousy a driver I am, or that officer is inconsiderate. Probably he is asking for, maybe he's bribing or something like that. But then when we are able to sleep, we become more objective of that event, meaning that, hey, probably I was really wrong. I was really wrong. I really violated a traffic law. Okay, and that makes us more at peace. Okay, so that's what good sleep does. Okay. Now there are other ways to cope. I have conducted debriefing sessions among those who were affected by typhoons in the past. Yolanda, Ondoy, that's part of what we do when as volunteers, to talk and debrief and hear the concerns of these people. And they have various ways of coping with such calamities. And among them, they would fix their things, rearrange their furniture, rearrange their house, put order in their cabinet. Some of them sing, some of them they do gardening. I think we have our own ways of coping, with stress. But one thing I realized when we were conducting that the briefing session, they would always end up with, I'm still thankful because my family is intact. I'm still thankful because, you see, there is that sense of gratitude. And, that's why Dr. Zen has been promoting this gratitude challenge. And I think that's something that we need to do deliberately, because it comes out in a way naturally among these people. There's that sense of thankfulness. And it's an indication of coping well, So when we start to feel thankful, then it means that we're able to cope well. Now, I'll be giving some recommendations here. This is a faith-based distress busting program. It's called Breakthrough. A friend of mine, Dr. Gabby Dillaco, is one of the pillars of this program. It's a 30-day program, but they have a 3-day free trial if you want to try this out, to help people cope with stress, especially during this pandemic. And then you can visit this site. And I'm also recommending this YouTube video Optimal Works, and actually you can check out other videos that they have there. This is by Dr. Kevin Majors. He's a psychiatrist I mentioned earlier about who teaches in Harvard Medical School. And these are the things that he mentioned in this video. He said that anxiety is an emotion, okay? And an emotion is a reaction to something, and it's good to acknowledge that emotion. I would hear people say, I feel sad. I don't want to feel sad, you know. I would say that emotions are like a litmus paper. It's an indication of what's happening inside. And that's why it's good to acknowledge if you're feeling sad or happy. But what's important is, hey, why am I sad? What's causing me to be angry? And then let's try to see, okay, what can I do about it? So it's good to accept our emotions, and it's better if you're able to give it a name. Now, teenagers, sometimes they don't know what's happening to them. If we enable them to be able to provide a word for those emotions, then that's going to be very helpful. This is, again, one of the things that we can help adolescents with. They feel so emotional that they can't describe what they're feeling, and it's good to give a name for that, you know. And then he also mentioned that emotion of fear, as some people see it. So anxiety is an emotion of fear. And he also mentioned this is something that's very I would say surprising for most people. Anxiety is just adrenaline that you view negatively. And in other words, you bring it on. So what he suggested is that when people feel anxious about something, it's actually adrenaline that is working there. And what does adrenaline do? It puts us into action. So instead of stopping ourselves from doing something because we feel anxious, then we try to take on a challenge. Okay, so maybe you'll learn more if you try to look into this video by Dr. Kevin Majors. Okay, now what's so different about the quarantine and the lockdown, and how does it contribute to anxiety and stress? Okay, one is there's a blurring boundary between space and time. Nowadays, maybe if you're working, your boss probably would still give you work after office hours. Maybe he can no longer do that if you're out of the office. Now the thing is, we also have routines. Like in the morning, we prepare ourselves, go out and travel to work. And then once we start working there, then okay, at least there's a clear distinction between I'm at work and I'm at home. But now that boundary actually disappeared, and somehow that one causes us to feel less in control. Okay, the public bleeds into the private, and sometimes when we have our private time, we just want it for ourselves. Something that's private, and it's somehow, for some people, it's a time for myself, for my family to recuperate without having to mind, the problems and difficulties around. But nowadays that doesn't happen. When we work at home, the kids are there. We're at home. We feel like wanting to rest. Of course, when we're at home, we want to rest. The thing is, no, we're working, and there's several suggestions on how to cope with this. Now, this has brought stress, fear, and anxiety. More or less, we know what these are. And fear also is there's a threat there. And, that we're fearful about what's happening. If, is my family protected? Are my loved ones who are sick going to recover? And maybe some of us, we have people we know who have suffered from COVID or other forms of sicknesses that had led them to die. And we're affected by that. It gives us some amount of fear also, other than stress and anxiety. Now, what's important is that, okay, we cope with stress. And this is one thing that I would mention every time I give talks on stress management, is that coping with stress, they have to start way beyond the onset of feeling anxious or feeling overly stressed. And that's why it's important that we take care of ourselves every day. Okay, let me start with this. Okay, now for this one, this is a schedule. What the pandemic brought us is that it removed some sense of control over things. They remove that sense of control, and to bring that back, to bring that sense of control back, it's good to have a schedule at home. It gives some sort of structure and control. I have also heard suggestions. Well, this was from my professor from UP Department of Psychology about focused work, that we can't expect ourselves to have that focused work for 8 hours. It's practically impossible, especially in this lockdown. What she was suggesting is look for the time of the day where we can actually focus and allow 2 to 3 hours of focused work. And the other parts would be a different kind of work. It doesn't have to be focused. If I might just share what I'm doing, since I'm doing my dissertation now, what I would do is I would be doing my readings during the day when my mind is fully focused, and I switch off myself from the internet so that I can do my readings and do my transcription as well. That's what I do in the morning when I have to do readings, things that would involve intellectual work. And in the afternoon, that's when I do my interviews. It's also when I do my mentoring sessions, my counseling sessions, and things that would not need too much focus. And again, it's a matter of planning things out for the week. So I plan my week, and then so that I can distribute properly accordingly. And okay, going back to the schedule, it's important that we can come up with a schedule. But this is one thing that we can help our adolescents with, to come up with a schedule, to give them some sort of security, some sort of structure, okay? Now, this one is Benjamin Franklin. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. So that's why planning is really very important, And let's look into the things that we can control. Again, the pandemic has removed some sense of control in our lives. So we cannot go out, as much as we want to, So we can control our sleep routine, how to speak to ourselves. If maybe when I would give talks also on stress management, I would talk about intrusive thoughts, negative self-talk, ruminations, things that causes us stress because of our own thoughts. And maybe one of these days I can elaborate on that more, and maybe teach 1 or 2 things about cognitive behavioral therapy in a way. And then we can also control who to follow, and then we can control the boundaries that we can set. We can control what we eat, okay? And then also we can ask for help. That's something that we can do also. And these are the things that we can explain to our adolescents, not to hesitate to ask for help. Now, this is something that I've read also in one of my readings, that if we are going to work, to dress up for it, to continue with the routine, that somehow helps us in our mental health. And it might mean, nakakatamad. I mean, I feel lazy having to dress up, and I'm just at home, In some schools that I've seen, they actually require the students to wear their uniform, and it gives a sense of professionalism. It puts you into the mood of studying or of working. That's one of the recommendations also, is to dress up for the occasion if you're a student or a teacher. Now, of course, it's good to know the news, but if we are so engrossed with the news, it might affect us emotionally. So it's good to be aware of what's happening, but don't indulge ourselves too much with the news. So have that sense of limitation also in what kind of news that we take in, So that's also important. In connecting with people, this is something that we have control over. So it's also good to get in touch with people through Facebook, or even friends that we have not seen before, or friends who are far away, halfway around the globe. it's good opportunity for us to catch up with them. At the same time, this could also be a source of stress. So we have to be careful also with using too much social media or connecting with people. But it's good. It's recommended that we get in touch with people also, even through online means. This is self-care, taking care of ourselves. I've asked this question to some people. What have you been wanting to do before when you didn't have time? You know, and when I asked that myself, I wanted to learn how to play the guitar, and now is the right time for me, or maybe for you, to discover what you really want and to actually do it. No? So that's self-care. We have to take care of ourselves. I've mentioned about sleeping well, doing hobbies, things that will help us grow. But at the same time, this is something that we can tell our teenagers, you have to take care of themselves. At the same time, thinking of the others. This is also very important. That's also very good mentally. Altruism, being of service to the others, thinking of the others is something that is very good in terms of mental health. And of course, we help others for the sake of helping them because we see the value of each person. No? We don't serve the others just because it's good for my mental health or it's good for my image. No. The bottom line here in altruism is looking at the value of other people, that they are worth my help. And it's also good that while we're thinking of taking care of ourselves, it's also very good to think of the others. And this is something that we ourselves can practice, and this is also something that we can encourage our teenagers to do. So you can ask them to take care of your little sibling, or can you to be mindful of also of other people, because they are going through something as well. We don't know what they're going through. So it's important that we think of the others as well. Now, I've mentioned about sleep, and there are a lot of studies on sleep. It's good to sleep. Oh, well, one thing is it's good to wake up at the same time every day. For teenagers, I think it's 7 to 9 hours of sleep is okay, but for us, 7 to 8 is okay. Now, oversleeping is actually harmful because it actually it punishes the brain in a way. In fact, we feel bad when we oversleep. We feel as if we actually lack sleep when we oversleep. So that's why a good amount of sleep is it's actually good. Oversleeping is actually more harmful. Okay, and then that's some of the suggestions there. And then sunlight, because sunlight actually early in the morning, 8 o'clock, maybe 7, 8, maybe the latest is 9. They help our body produce vitamin D, which is good for our immune system. So that's why 10 minutes, 15 minutes under the sun is actually good, especially nowadays, to boost our immune system. So if we have an opportunity to be able to get sunlight, then let's do it, And diet, okay, it's good if you're able to eat properly. I've seen some of my friends actually gain weight because of the situation. And one thing that we can do is, what I tell others also, even kids, out of sight, out of mind. So if food is out of our sight, then we will not be thinking of food. And if we preoccupy ourselves with something else, then, we can, help us, we can keep ourselves from eating too much. And exercise, because it's also good not only physically but emotionally also. It helps cleanse the toxin in our body, and if you're able to find time to do exercise. Well, this one is Nike Training Club. This is what I use for exercise, and it's been very helpful for me, or try to spend time with other physical activities. I think teenagers would want to do this, to exercise. Okay, we have some sort of breathing, and I think we can have do this shortly, and maybe later if we have time, I can do the guided imagery. But breathing here to be able to help us relax. This is what wanting to help us. They call it the 4-7-8 breathing, which means 4 means 4 counts, 7 means 7 counts, 8 means 8 counts. When say 4 counts, we take a deep breath, slow deep breath in 4 counts. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then hold the breath for 7 seconds. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and slowly exhale all the air in your lungs for 8 counts. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So if for those of you who are listening here right now, if you feel comfortable, so we can do this little exercise. It's just a short exercise. So put your your right hand over your chest, and then put your left hand in front of your belly button. So the thing here is when we breathe, it's the diaphragm that expands. When we inhale, the diaphragm expands. So take a deep breath and feel our belly expand, and then hold it for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. So we will do this all together. So when I say inhale, I'll be counting up to 4. Okay. So put your hands, your right hand over your chest, and then your left hand in front of your belly button, and then inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold it for 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and slowly exhale. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's do it one more time. Inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and I hope that that one somehow help you feel a little better. And actually, this you can feel the effect of this at the end of the day when we are very stressful. When we are very tired. Now there's guided imagery. It will take around 7 to 10 minutes to do this. But maybe if we have time later, I can probably demonstrate this. I've used this to a group of 60 individuals in Zoom when I gave a talk on stress management. And I got good feedback on this. Okay? And that's the end of my talk. I guess we may have a few minutes for question and answer. Zen?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, James. I've actually left some messages in your chat box. You will find your chat box on the right side of your screen. That I left there my email. I'm actually currently recording this video, and
Okay.
once uploaded, I'll be sending the link to those people who would send me an email.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also be sending some of the screenshots of the resources you shared earlier. No, they're quite interesting, especially those regarding psychosocial support and help. Likewise, that resource which you'll find in YouTube. By the way, you mentioned self-care, James. I'd like to
Yes.
mention this. Take this opportunity to just announce to everyone that next week I'll be conducting a webinar on crafting your self-care plan and coping with the coping strategies, especially during this pandemic. No? So it's something which I think you'd find useful. You'll get at least a few tips which could be um, life altering, depending on how we are regarding our state of our well-being and our wellness, and something that could also help the others. No?
Mhm.
So any questions? For those who have questions, you may use your chat box, or if you wish to be heard, you can unmute your microphone, and James would be just willing to will answer your questions. You know, James, actually 1 hour is not enough, or one webinar is not enough. I'm
Yeah.
sure in the future we can arrange another webinar, especially when it comes to actual counseling.
Mhm.
Well, often I have one question, James. No?
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm sure most parents, especially given this time, if you even if we may say that okay, they have a lot of time in their hands,
Yeah.
they're quite busy working at home or perhaps even working in the office, depending on the condition of the company. And right now, you have kids precisely having sort of an ample time, not knowing what to do, perhaps uncontrolled
Yeah.
regard to what to do. And as I've heard from some people cases of I think anxiety and even depression has been increasing or has increased, no?
Yes, yes.
Given the fact that kids don't have the, say, the social circle that they can move on physically.
Mhm.
Um, Now, as you mentioned earlier, kids don't have a developed prefrontal cortex, meaning self-control, perhaps, or even this thing of making serious decisions is is perhaps not as functional as mature adults would have, no?
Mhm.
So how would you assist? Let's say, how would you encourage, for instance, let's say a young guy who precisely has symptoms of anxiety, no? When in fact perhaps even the mere fact of, let's say, acting on himself, making simple decisions like, taking a walk, or looking out, trying to see, okay, what positive things are there outside, rather
Mhm.
than just getting stuck with himself or with herself on his mobile phone. So how do you get to encourage this person?
Okay. Well, maybe one thing that I would probably suggest is to listen, to somehow understand our kids. Maybe as parents, this is also from experience with some parents I've had. I mean, parents I've spoken with. We want to give immediate solutions when our kids talk to us about a difficulty. And I think most of the time, more than the solution, what the kids want is for the parents to listen and to understand them. So, what is comforting for them is that they're allowed to talk. Talking out what's inside us is actually very curative, I would say. It's very cathartic. I would say. Even for my counseling sessions, there are people who have, maybe for the first time they're able to open up what they wanted to do. And what we can do is not to interrupt what they're saying. In fact, we can even encourage them to talk further by, asking them questions. I would want to focus on this first, listening to our kids, because they would feel understood. And once they feel understood, then they can easily connect with us. They could, reach out to us if ever they have difficulties, and it will enable us to help them. I think to form that connection first, uh, you know, uh, and then one other thing is non-judgmental. When we say non-judgmental, it's not as if we will not judge them. It's just not to feel surprised if they mention some things that probably they have done wrong. Of course, the kids know that it's wrong, but what's important is I think they also would want to get over that. So to give them that opportunity to go beyond those mistakes, not to focus on that mistake, but focus on how can we recover, how can we do. Okay, so that's just one. Now, when kids are feeling anxious, for first is again listening to them and then enable them. Again, as what I learned from Dr. Kevin Majors is that um, anxiety is actually adrenaline, and adrenaline actually puts us into action. So we enable um, this our children to do something. So we ask them, "What do you want to do?" So we ask them to do something, maybe draw, maybe like create something, or talk with a friend. Or what's important is we ask them what they can do. So in a way, it's also empowering them rather than what do you call this, immersing themselves, or I would say marinating our thoughts with those unhealthy thoughts. What can happen is we can give them things to do so that they won't focus on those thoughts. They would focus on the things that they are doing. So to enable them, how can we give them things to do? One thing is, if it's actually an advantage if kids read, because they can be so immersed in reading, and it's also healthy in a way. It's not painful for the eyes. If unlike other kids who are immersed into all sorts of internet things. So that's one thing, to give them something to do. Maybe building a model, or painting, or trying to do things together. So and other things that I've mentioned there would probably help. But I think primarily is to listen and to know what our kids need by listening, really listening well.
James has Anju has a question. You can actually find it in the chat box.
Okay, Andrew. Okay, some adolescents have difficulty obeying their parents, especially about following a schedule of activities in the house. Do you think setting a schedule of activities with these kids is practical? Do you respect their freedom? How do we deal with these kids? Well, actually, it's a very good question, Andrew, because what can happen there is that the parents could agree with the adolescent to make a schedule and to explain to them, what's the purpose of the schedule, and we can tell them that there's this research that, to help us cope, it's good to have that some sense of control, because what this pandemic did is it removed some sense of control. Now, another control for the kid there is that if you are able to agree with the schedule, it doesn't have to be the schedule the parent wants. They could meet halfway. Okay, so I think this could still be effective if you're able to explain to the kids. Now, if they find it difficult obeying their parents, so that's already something that we have to do. Why is the kid, why does he find it difficult to obey? And that's something that we can look into. Again, let me go back to listening. Does the kid feel that the parents listen to him or to her? Does he feel understood? And if that's the case, if the kid doesn't feel understood, then that's something probably we need to build up on first. Okay, so to listen, and of course it takes some time. It's not just that that instance that listen to him and then he'll trust. It takes time to develop that kind of relationship. But then again, yeah, people apply differently for different parent-child relationship. But that is what I would suggest. Okay.
Okay, other questions? Those of you who have children or adolescents, or those who are dealing with young ones right now, teachers perhaps. Any questions? You may use the chat box, and if not, you can also use your microphone. You can unmute your microphone. Other questions? No? Well, James, usually among adults, they say that if adults have problems, like if men have problems, they usually drink, right, as an escape. And women on the other hand, they shop. No? But now it's difficult to go physical shopping, only online shopping. So what's the useful escape among adolescents, especially when they have problems? What do they usually do? Perhaps you already know the answers, but what's the habitual escape of adolescents, and how should we help them to, okay, it's an escape, but it's a stopgap measure. So how can we help them, given those types of escapes that they would give themselves?
Yeah, well, maybe what you mentioned is very true, no? Even for young people, they would also resort to drinking or talking or shouting, Nowadays,
Shopping, I mean, not shouting, huh? Shopping.
Shopping, sorry, shopping.
For women.
For women shopping pala, no? I think some people, they also do shopping now, online shopping, Now, well, to help them cope, but we have to know our kids, what interests them. And sometimes it's also good to let them be by themselves, to allow them to sort things on their own. As long as, we know that they're safe, we know that, it's good for them to go through the difficulties because they are coping with it and they're trying to, in a way, practice their own problem-solving skills, So when they're on their own, we allow them, let them, give them time and space, and then maybe when they're ready, then maybe talk to them. I think that's the best way, I would say, also to talk to them, to cope with them. And then I think, if they feel understood, then that would be good for them. And maybe explaining also that some of the coping mechanisms are maybe immediate, that the results might be immediate. For example, drinking. The result, I mean, the effect on us is very immediate. We feel better if we drink, but it could lead us to excessive drinking. And again, the prefrontal cortex doesn't know. I mean, it prevents it from looking beyond that immediate feeling. What happens when someone overdrinks? It feels very bad. So if we presented that to the adolescent, if you drink, it might make you feel bad after. So maybe we can look for an alternative. Maybe the person likes to sing, singing, So look for other alternatives instead of that, let's say, that coping mechanism of drinking. So we present that to adolescent. We may say that, okay, the effect might not be as immediate as, the effects we get after drinking, but it's healthier in the long run. If you try to project it, it's better for you, You will not feel this bad after, So it's good to look for other ways to cope. Yeah.
So some of our participants who are still around, you may have some experience which you may want to share with us, real case experience, especially in raising your kids or dealing with your students, no? Young ones.
Mhm.
So before anyone pops in his or her answer, may I ask you, James, to the extent that you can perhaps reveal or talk about a particular real experience, no? What has been the worst case that you have dealt with, and let's say the success result out of an intervention which you use perhaps in dealing with a particular case, without revealing persons, without violating privacy matters, no?
Well, the worst case normally involves medical interventions. So we coordinate with we're a team with other counselors and also with psychiatrists. So, but I can only mention to that extent. It was really difficult because of the repercussions, because it involves the life of the person. But if I may share one story, if it's okay, this is a usual thing. Um, yeah, if I just may share this because it's a nice story. There's this student who came in my office. Sometimes he just walk in and then he was crying and he was telling me, "Sir, my teacher is so unfair. He embarrassed me in front of the class. It's because I am against Trump and this professor is for Trump, and he embarrassed me in front of the class." And then after, okay, can you tell me how did he embarrass you, sir? Because he asked a question. It's a very simple question, but I wasn't able to answer. And then he started telling me things, and then he started crying. Okay, so was the question difficult? And then he said, "Sir, no, in fact, it's so easy." Okay, and then when I sat down, I actually was able to answer it. When I asked him, "How come you were not able to answer it when you were standing?" And he said, "Sir, because I'm stressed, I wasn't able to sleep well. It's the finals week. And then I went back to his question. So you were saying that your teacher was pretty harsh on you because you're for Trump, no? And you're anti-Trump. Now, if the teacher asked that, if that question was not answered by another classmate, would your teacher behave that way? And then he said, "Well, yes, sir. Okay, I think the teacher will talk that way, even if it's another person who answers it incorrectly." So I was telling him, then probably it's not because you're anti-Trump. That's why he's doing that. So he's not being particularly harsh on you because of that. And then it's understandable that you aren't able to answer your question because you lack sleep. And when we lack sleep, we aren't able to think well, and you're stressed with a lot of things. And that somehow gave him some sort of calm, and then he left the office at peace. We may have that kind of thinking that my professor is harsh on me, but when we try to look into the reality of things, actually it's not. So that's why it's also important to challenge certain thoughts or beliefs of this individual. So it's also good to draw out from them what these thoughts are and challenge them. Okay. So yeah, that's probably something I can share.
Okay, anything else? Anything else you'd like to share? Any other questions? So for those who have questions, well, please feel free to ask. We've actually gone past our schedule. Well, sorry about that, but I'm sure you've gained a lot, or there's a few things that you can work on. As I mentioned earlier, if we take care of adolescents, we ourselves also have to take care of ourselves. That's why next week we have this webinar on self-care, which you also mentioned. Self-care is something which we already do as adults, but it's something perhaps which we have to think more, especially during these days, no? Because it's as we would usually say, when we take care of ourselves, we actually are taking care of others. No? We cannot give what we don't have, and the better we're able to take care of ourselves as adults,
Mhm.
we could end up becoming more useful and helpful for the others. No?
Mhm.
Again, if there are no more questions, well, please, before you leave this webinar, check your chat box for some messages. I've recorded these and I'll be able to upload this perhaps within this week and share with you the link. If you're interested, you can just send me an email. Well, again, James, thank you very much. And if there's anything else you'd like to tell us or share with us before we end this webinar, well, you have about a few seconds.
Yeah, so thank you also, Dr. Zen. And well, I cannot overemphasize the importance of taking care of ourselves and helping others. And that's why I hope that you also attend the webinar next week on self-care by Dr. Odani.
Okay, and perhaps you can also leave your contact information in the chat box, James, so that
Mhm.
before people leave, just in case they're interested to get in touch with you or refer someone to you, just leave it in the chat box. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you, James, for spending some time with us, sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your expertise. And well, best of luck to your dissertation. Well, hope you'll I'm sure you will ace your dissertation, and we look forward to another webinar with you in the next few weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone.